So my name is Marty, and I am a member of the CascadiaNow chapter, one of the main organizers. And this event was kind of put together for the Women's March, or Women Act on Seattle, because we believe that through Cascadia, it's a personal identity that can help us to jump in and make the changes that we believe can make positive impact throughout the bioregion and throughout the world. Yes, it was the computer died, so it should just need to charge. And after yesterday's march, the organizers of the march and Women Act on Seattle, or Seattle Women Marching, I think is their technical name of the organization. They wanted to do something more than just get people out on the streets. They wanted to provide opportunities to get more educated and find ways to get directly involved. Has anybody else been to activities throughout the day? What's your name?
Melissa.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
And which one did you go to?
I was over at the Riveter and I saw a couple of the presentations around
Awesome.
feminism and women migrant issues.
That's really good. I really wanted to go to that one. It looked like a fun place.
Yeah, it was.
And did they suggest to come down here, or did you?
No, I saw this on the website. So.
Great. I'm glad to hear that the word is getting out somehow. So this is Horizon Books, and they're awesome in letting us use this venue. And Brandon will give a talk right after me. He's the owner of the bookstore.
For those who weren't here before, it was mentioned that this is also the location of the weekly meetings of the CascadiaNow Seattle chapter, Wednesdays at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Ben. And yeah, we're totally open. Anybody can come join and sit in and learn about what we're doing. So my talk is about bioregionalism and what this term means, how we define it, and how we use it to kind of shape our movement.
And your name?
My name is Marty, and my notes are everywhere. Because I've given this talk several times, but I change it every single time and write myself new notes. But there's a lot of information about bioregionalism. Yes, Chair. Sure, that would be great. Let's see. To start. So bioregionalism is a term that was coined a few decades ago, mainly in the 70s, through some of the environmental movements. And the Center for Bioregional Research was started in the 70s to promote this idea that we are part of the land and we need to be engaged with the land that we live on in order to actually create the world we want to see around us. And can you guys read that okay? From my direction, I can't read it so well. I'll read it out loud because I really like this description, and I don't know who wrote it. I wish we had context on this, but I think it was, go forward, I think Gary Schneider was the man who had this quote, but Cascadia is a land of falling waters. It stretches east to where the rain first meets land, pooling into streams, cascading into rivers until its eventual return to the Pacific Ocean. As far south as the salmon run, and its borders extend to wherever a person makes a conscious shift to live with intentionality and with Cascadia in their heart. And I was reflecting while Ryan was reading the chapter of his book that Cascadia really is a personal choice. And the last part of this quote really touches deep to me. Wherever a person makes a conscious shift to live with intentionality and with Cascadia in their heart. And I've been exploring intentional living for about 4 or 5 years, ever since I heard about it. it made a lot of sense to me that we can be humans that just go through our lives, eat breakfast, go to work, eat lunch, dinner, see your family, watch TV, and live. And that's fine. Some people make that choice. And I think that living intentionally can provide another level of living that brings some more joy to ourselves, our community, and can be really good for the planet. So bioregionalism, in my true belief, is a shift towards living consciously with intentionality. Cascadia has to be, or tends to be, the regional identity that people show. So this is a picture of what we call the Salish Sea. And if people have their maps, the Salish Sea sits almost directly in the middle of the whole bioregion. And I'll stand over here for this part. And it is the most populated region in the bioregion. A whole 2/3 of all the people living in the California, Oregon, Washington, DC, Idaho region live within this section of land. Now in 2011, environmentalists and political representatives came together and decided that in order to live more bioregionally and sustain for our native lands, we need to identify not as two countries with two different land bases, but as one unit that's sharing this water between us. And one of the main parts of this shift was people in the Puget Sound started realizing that Victoria's sewage system is going directly into the Salish Sea. I don't know if you guys remember, if anybody heard about this. It's like, I mean, it was ever since Victoria was created until just about a decade ago that they did not have a sewer system to process their sewer water. And when you have the Strait of Juan de Fuca washing in and out twice a day, it might not seem super relevant and it kind of cleans itself. But we are a region and the water is shared. And so there was a push to have Victoria change their programs and create a sewage treatment plant, which was like pushed heavily from the people of the Puget Sound part of the bioregion. And so that's one example of the two countries coming together and actually making positive change based on our values and beliefs. The next slide is the Cascadia Mega region. And instead of just looking at the Puget Sound, the Georgia Strait, and the Strait of Juan de Fuca up here, we extend all the way from Vancouver, BC, down through all of the Puget Sound, Olympia, Portland, Salem, and Eugene. And this is what we call the mega region of Cascadia, and that is 80% of the population lives in this section of the Cascadia region. So on our big map here, we're going from about there to here, and that little strip. So that's where the majority of the Cascadia population lives, and that includes urban and rural areas. These pictures aren't so clear down on the bottom, but there's a very visible identity in each of these cityscapes. This is Vancouver, Vancouver, BC, and there's water in the city, and there's mountains in the background. This is Seattle, and we have water and mountains in the background. What I think is the best mountain, that's my personal opinion, Mount Rainier. And we have Portland. And there's water, couldn't find a picture with water and the mountain in Portland, but we have the Willamette River and Mount Hood. And this is the identity that Ryan was talking about. We all see this, It's very hard to ignore, and it creates a sense of pride within us, and I believe puts the environment at the front of our consciousness, that we are a part of the land. We're not just this cementscape that covers the land, and we have some responsibility to it because we see it every day. This is Gary Schneider, one of the founders of bioregionalism, and he says, "Find your place on the planet, dig in, and take responsibility from there." And that's a rallying cry to me, because we can live anywhere we want. We are Americans, which is arguably one of the most free nations on the history of this planet, with the level of social structure that we've gained at this point. But we chose to live here because of the culture, because of the environment. Maybe it's just because this is where you were born and you haven't known anything else, but like me, I was born here. I've never known anywhere else, because whenever I leave, I just want to come back. And so my responsibility is here, and I really enjoy digging in and making the changes and being part of a movement. So a little culture here is the Doug flag, which you see on all of our Cascadia stuff. And this is a flag that was adopted from Alexander Baratek in 1995. He created this. I believe he was in Eastern Europe. Slovakia, yes, thank you. And kind of had this idea that we needed an identifying symbol. And if we look at the parts of our natural world that make up who we are, we'll start at the bottom. And it's the trees, it's the green, it's the flora that gives us the air that we breathe. We have very clean air. We are proud of that. We should be happy about that. For many years, for decades, we've had people putting time, volunteering to make sure that our government is taking care of our land based on the actual laws that they're creating. And this happens around the world, but here specifically, we are kind of leading the charge, especially California. They've done a wonderful job, and bioregionally, we can set the tone and share our ideals. It's kind of a tangent. Let's get back to the flag. The white is the snow-capped mountains and the clouds that encompass the whole bioregion. As far south as you go in the bioregion, the very southern part, Mendocino coast, is where the redwoods are. And the redwoods are covered in fog almost all day, every year, because of the rich moisture that's there. And obviously in Seattle we have lots of clouds. So we have the white. The blue is the water that comes from above and flows below. This is what brings us the culture that we have. The recreation that makes us who we are is so much related to the water that we get to use. We have ample amounts of water right now, and our government, and like I said before, people spend a lot of time making sure that our water is clean, and we are writing regulations. And raise your hand if you've ever been involved in a political campaign to keep our water clean. It's important work. It's not the easiest stuff, but it pays off. And part of bioregionalism is adding what you can, whenever you can, be it making phone calls or going to rallies, whatever it is, or writing legislation, even better. And then in the middle we have the Douglas fir tree. And this is a symbol of our region because you can find the Douglas fir all throughout the bioregion, all the way south, all the way north in Alaska, and all the way east into the east side of the Cascades and up into the Rockies. You know the history of the region. The Douglas fir brought us the wealth that we use to create a vibrant community. This area was created, or this area was pioneered by Europeans, and before that people lived with the trees much more in harmony. The Salish people use the cedar tree as for almost everything in their life. And as Europeans moved in, they, for lack of a better term, harvested the trees to start the economy that we now live in today. And we would not be living in the way we are without the Douglas fir to have created that wealth. Fortunately, we are taking a little bit better care of our forests these days based on activists, again, people doing what they can to step up and keep certain tracts of forest intact, and our scientists doing research to find out what it takes to actively manage our forests properly so that we aren't just destroying our environment, even if we've made some mistakes in the past on that. So that's the Doug flag, again created by Alexander Veritek in 1995. And I encourage everybody to show this flag wherever they can. You can buy a flag, we're selling them today. And you can go online and buy multiple flags to give them out as presents. You can get stickers. We have our 3x5 stickers and our smaller stickers. Part of the bioregional movement is showing your identity. If we're not showing off who we are, then nobody's going to know. We live in a city that is very dormant for part of the year, and we don't talk to each other much until the sun comes out. So I find it very important to show off who I am when I'm not able to just talk to people face to face, wearing a Douglas fir sticker on my phone or on my wallet or on my car, or hanging the flag from my house. This is something we can all do. And as cultural movements go, we have to hold this culture close and show off who we are. Because that's always been how cultural movements get started and progress. And that is exactly what Cascadia is, and bioregionalism. So Cascadia is a bioregion, as we've talked about. And if anybody, we have some new people. You guys can share these maps. I want these back. You could buy a map later, if you would like, for $2. And this is put together by Sightline Institute. Don't know where they're based out of. Seattle, thank you. But they are a bioregional educational organization, and they produce this wonderful map. And another map that we have to describe Cascadia is the McCloskey map. And what's his first name? David McCloskey has been working on this for several decades, and it is by far the most detailed in terms of geographical texturing, flora and fauna, and environmental aspects that we have. So the northern tip is up in Alaska, and we define bioregions by watersheds. And the Cascadia bioregion, starting at the top, comes from the Copper River watershed, which is, as you may know, has the largest salmon run that we use as a fishery. I don't know if it's the largest one in the world anymore. Is that a yes?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And very important to our bioregional aspect is having the salmon farming, not farming, I shouldn't use that term, the salmon industry as a way of life for us. So that starts at the top in the Copper River. As we go south, we go through BC and go along the Pacific border, or the Pacific Ocean border. And this is some of the most biodiverse habitat in the entire world. Haida Gwaii, which is this small triangular island off the coast. People have been living there for 14,000 years. Through an ice age, the Haida people have thrived on their islands. And at the southern point is a place called Barnaby Narrows, is the most biodiverse oceanic environment in the whole world on Haida Gwaii. Going south, we reach the chunk of British Columbia that is the Fraser River watershed. There's a map hanging on the wall at the back of our room here, and I encourage everybody to participate today in the coloring of that map if you have any time. We'll bring it out on the table here. And the red of that map is the Fraser River watershed. And my goal is to highlight the main watersheds and the tributaries within those watersheds. So in BC we have the Fraser River. Going south is the Columbia River Basin, which is the largest river watershed east of the Rockies.
West.
Thank you. West of the Rockies, east of the Pacific Ocean. I should have more statistics on the Columbia River, but it is huge and stretches all the way into Montana. It does go into northern BC. I don't know if you can quite see. Watch out, PowerPoint. Yeah, so on our maps, the Columbia River goes all the way up into BC towards the Continental Divide north of Kelowna. And you can see on the map too, it's highlighted in blue. And it's quite staggering how gigantic of a watershed the Columbia River is. And it also includes the Snake River, flows into the Columbia, but we consider the Snake River a separate watershed because it's so large. Hey, there's a map of a list of all my watersheds. So the Snake River Basin drains almost all of Idaho, goes into Montana. A really cool fact is that Yellowstone is on the most eastern point of the Snake River bioregion, or mega region. So we actually have water that flows from any river on the west side of Yellowstone flows into our region. The rest of it flows into the Mississippi. South we have the Willamette River, which also flows into the Columbia, but is an important part of the industrial side of Oregon. A lot of farming happens through the Willamette River, and it flows through Portland. Going south, there's lots of small rivers that flow into the Pacific Ocean along the coast there, and the Deschutes River is also part of that watershed, until you get down to the Klamath River, which flows out of Mount Shasta, which is in the southern border of the Cascadia region. Mount Shasta, the northwest side of Mount Shasta, flows into the Klamath, which flows out the Northern California-Oregon border. The southern border has a few different areas of definition. The Great Basin is kind of where the Great Basin does its subtle curve and crest. Any water landing on the north side is in the Cascadia Bioregion. South goes into the San Francisco Bay or Colorado River. The east border of our bioregion is the Rocky Mountains and the Continental Divide. So any water that flows or lands on the west side of the Continental Divide is going into the Cascadia watershed. So that's the borders of Cascadia, and Ryan talked about how we don't have political borders in the Cascadia bioregion, and bioregional movements themselves, I don't want to say that they don't recognize political borders, because they're still all around us, and we have to acknowledge that while they are present. But we can look at our regional identity based on our watersheds, and this is a personal choice that we can all make, and is very important for making a collective community. Because if we can support the local or businesses and organizations within our bioregion, it makes our bioregion stronger. And this is the main point that I like to talk about, is the regional identity, and we vote with our dollar. This is something that we do every day. We spend our money, and we can support communities that use products and resources from our region, or we can support products from outside of our region. But if we want to create an inclusive and interdependent movement, spending our dollar and finding where we can spend our dollar to make the most impact is very important, and is something we can all do. CascadiaNow has a list of businesses that highlight Cascadian values and use local resources and hire locally. And somebody asked a question earlier, I think she might have left, about does bioregionalism support international trade? Or something along those lines. And bioregionalism does say we need to shop locally and use local resources. That isn't totally relevant right now because we can't be getting all of our resources from the region. So I think as a movement grows, it can be a goal of our large corporations and our governments to be promoting using local ingredients and local resources. But in the short term, we do have to use resources from outside of our bioregion. But the mindset of change is that over time, as we latch onto this regional identity, we can promote our local region and become more inclusive. And like I said, this starts with everyday choices. Going to a local grocery store is something that is a choice that you can make every day. Buying what you can from local shops. And sometimes that's not possible, and that's okay. But making small choices, trying to, even going online and finding online shops that are local and reading labels, finding out, is this mustard made in Oregon or is this mustard made in Tennessee? Small choices like that can make a big difference. And once you get into the habits, it becomes much easier. And culture is about forming habits around everyday choices. And it's a shared vision through the social movement. So we all participate in society, whatever way you choose. This picture is of the Portland Timbers Army. Cascadia is big in soccer. We have the Cascadia Cup. This is how people express their cultures, because a lot of people enjoy sports, and I think it's just totally awesome that people have embraced the Cascadia Doug flag for a symbol of our soccer identity. And CascadiaNow as an organization is helping sponsor the Cascadian Athletic Football Foundation. Is that the name of it?
Cascadia Associated Football Foundation or something.
Associated Football Foundation.
Yeah.
Thank you. So in the summer of 2018, there is a World Cup for non-recognized nations. Yeah. And Cascadia is participating in that in London. So as part of our social culture and identity, you can root for the Cascadia world team as they participate in London later this year. Aaron highlighted a few other things that CascadiaNow participates in. The music festival. And this picture is somebody climbing a mountain and waving their Cascadia flag. And it's these kinds of things that share our cultural identity and show the world. Because if we're not sharing this with the world and saying, this is who we are, this is our identity. If you move here, you can choose to take on this identity and add value to your own personal life, because we're all in this together, and we will support each other. If you show off that you are Cascadian, we will support you. Not that we won't support you if you don't, but we can choose to do that. More bioregionalism action is sort of during some of the marches and rallies. We like to show our flags off. This is Cascadia Day, a long time ago, which is May 18th. We have some Cascadia Week events and Cascadia Day events coming up. This is the eruption of Mount St. Helens. That's where we get that date.
The 1980 eruption, I assume.
Yes, the 1980 eruption, thank you.
Perhaps the only one for which we know an exact day.
Yes. I really like this picture because it shows an example of one of the events that we as a community rose up to challenge something that we didn't believe in as a cultural identity. People in this area are generally opposed to fossil fuel drilling and exploration when it's not necessarily something we need. And if we're going to transition to renewable energy, which is arguably a value that bioregionalism promotes, is renewable energy because it's a local source of energy rather than something we get from across the world. Oil is not bioregional. That's pretty easy to say. So this is an exploration tanker going up to the Arctic, and 2 years ago, Activists staged a massive rally and protest against this, and our voice was heard. The oil tanker was blockaded for a while, and while it might seem insignificant because the oil tanker did get up to the Arctic, it became more and more likely that there was not going to be anything of value. And with all of the pressure against this and the ports of our bioregion saying, you know, we're not actually going to support this, and there's lots of pressure because we put pressure on them, Shell decided that they weren't going to drill in the Arctic. And this is a big win for us, and it's the small things going out to a kayak rally that actually make a difference, and it's fun too. If you've ever gone and done actions, it is a thrill. This is a Sasquatch that we've used at various parades as a way to show our culture. Sasquatch is kind of a theme that we like to highlight, and we have lots of Sasquatch patches, and we have some stuffed Sasquatch heads. I don't know where they came from, but they're awesome. We sell them in the store in the back there. If your kids need some stuffed animals, this is a good one. People expressing their culture through tattoos. Always like that. Rallies. We are political activists. We stand up for our beliefs through politics, and Bernie Sanders was a great example of something that we could rally around and show our support behind. And even though things didn't end how some of us may have wished, a lot came out of the political movement for Bernie Sanders, and we shouldn't take that for granted. Politicians recognize that we have values. People wrote letters, people made phone calls, and by making our voice heard, we have started to elect politicians that are changing the game in our state, in our city, and their voice is being heard across the country. And it's important that we stay active in this, because as we elect more and more officials, it's going to make a big change. And especially on the West Coast, we have 3 states that are pushing policies for the environment, for social issues, and giving liberties to groups that have never received recognition before. And it's because of our actions and showing off why we want this stuff that things are getting done. So find organizations that you support. Black Lives Matter is a wonderful group. There's multiple sides of this organization, but just representing and lending your voice out makes for a better culture, and we can be doing that on a daily basis. Tar sands blockades, like that. I really like this picture, and it's a younger person with a sign, and I first thought it said youth ethics count, but it actually says your ethics count. But I like youth ethics because this is a movement that began back in the 70s, and each generation adds their own part to it. I'm 25, and I know that the people around me in my generation have ethics that do count, and we need to be passing those ethics on. And anybody that came before me and staged protests, raised banners, made their voice heard in Congress, I appreciate that, because it got me into it and showed me that it's possible. And this is going to continue. We're going to be sharing this with the younger generations as they go, and it's a movement that grows by each generation. And if we can continue showing off how we make the changes, then it's going to become easier for one, it's going to become normalized, and eventually people will just be doing things the right way. We will be using alternative energies, renewable energies, because we'll have the infrastructure there. We will be eating healthier food that's locally grown, because it's there, it's available, and it's normalized. And it's only through our actions right now and showing off our ethics that we can pass those on. Beer is a big part of the region. Nothing wrong with enjoying local craft. And it's a way that we can support, it's actually a great example of supporting local business. A lot of people look for local beers and find their local beers that they enjoy. And we can do that with all our products. Get the, I don't know, what's something we eat every day? Local flour. I mean, it's a basic thing. You can get flour that's made in Kansas or the East Coast, or you can get flour that's made here in Oregon. Natural Directions is an Oregon-based company, and they produce a line of products that can replace almost everything that you use in your kitchen. So buying local from natural organics is one example. This is a local scout group that's been around because kids need to learn about the environment somehow, and it's fun. As I've said before, this quote is, this is more than a movement, it's an emerging culture and regional identity built around shared principles and values and rooted in love of place. And everybody can cling on to that. And you can share that with people. Talk to your friends. Tell them about your love of place. Talk about it openly with your family. And the more we talk about it, the more people will latch on and learn about it. And I think that's the end of my presentation I want to cover. Yeah, and CascadiaNow is an organization that promotes these ideals and helps you make the everyday decisions that you want. Let me see if I'm missing anything else from my notes. So just a list of a few things that I do in my life, and we have a promotion list on one of the back tables back there of things you can do every day in your life that are small or big. And I encourage everybody to explore their own options and what they want to do. Money is a big one. You can choose to bank at a credit union. They put money back to their members, and it doesn't go out to Wall Street and CEO checks. Credo Mobile is a nonprofit organization that has mobile service. Yeah, Ben, you use Credo?
Yeah, I think it's pronounced Credo.
Credo, thank you. Yeah, you're right, because there's, yes. And Credo's awesome because they take 10% of their profits. I don't know.
Five, I think.
What?
5, I think.
5% of the profits they go and put directly into their community organizations.
And activist groups. Yeah, they're national though. They're not bioregional.
True. That is true. I still think it's a wonderful thing to get away from some other larger phone companies. Family-owned or employee-owned businesses are a wonderful way, and co-ops are a wonderful way to support your community in your actions and through spending. Making phone calls and sending emails, while it might seem small, actually makes a big difference. If you make phone calls to your representatives once a week, once a month, whenever you want to, it's incredibly easy once you get in the habit, and people are nice to talk to on the phone, always. And if you become a member of certain campaigns like the Sierra Club, they even help you to make the phone calls by giving you the phone numbers and a little script on things to say, especially for fossil fuel infrastructure projects. A lot of our representatives like to hear from us, and when we make a phone call or go see them in their office, it's a little bit harder, but if you can, it makes a huge difference. Those are the things that stand out. Sierra Club has a credit card that you can sign up for if you use credit cards. I just talked to Tracy about using Who Gives a Crap toilet paper and paper towels. And this is more, I don't know.
It's not local, but
it's not local, but it uses
they don't wrap anything in plastic.
sustainable products.
And it's all bamboo.
Yeah, bamboo sustainable products is a wonderful way to go. And these are just small examples of things. So I encourage everybody to do some research on their own of ways that you can become more bioregional and supporting local businesses and sustainable businesses. Are there any questions about my presentation about the Cascadia Bioregion itself or bioregionalism?
This is just sort of a linguistics question. It's called Cascadia. The Cascade Mountains just barely go north of the Canadian border, but more than 50% of the territory is north of the 49th parallel. Does that end up making organization with people that live in Canada or Alaska more difficult? That we...
I have not experienced difficulty in organizing in Canada. Because
I'm just talking about because of the name.
Yeah, it's actually the first time I've heard that. Cascadia means a lot of different things to a lot of people. Cascades are the mountain range, and it doesn't go all the way through the bioregion, it's true, but it's a prominent part, and
Kind of merges into the coastal mountains in Canada.
yeah, it merges into the other mountains. But water cascades, and part of the name Cascadia comes from the water cascading down. One of my quotes here is that it's a land of falling waters.
Okay, following up on that.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
How do people in the desert regions of eastern Washington feel about that statement?
Oh, about land of falling waters?
Yeah.
There is still water that flows through, and we all live off of water, so we have to get our water somehow.
True everywhere in
And
the
while it
world.
might not be so prominent in the desert, that's actually an interesting question then. And I don't know if I've ever heard people griping. It'd be interesting to throw that towards the Boise chapter and see how they feel. Because CascadiaNow does have chapters popping up across the mountains. And there are people with regional identities there, and they're an important aspect to our culture. We might not always understand that or believe it. If you are a left liberal, there is obviously a change of opinion as you go into rural areas on some topics. But again, it's just some topics. We all need fresh water to drink. We all need healthy food. We all need a community that will be supportive for us. We all need electricity. And we're all going to need a future as we go forward. And there's not one correct way. And bioregionalism can be molded to the specific areas. And we don't all need to be under the rule of one way of life. But there are a few fundamental aspects to moving forward. We need to protect the environment. And if we're in eastern Washington, we see a lot of farming. And farming can't happen with polluted water, with polluted lands. We didn't have proper farming practices in this country for the first 200 years. And when the Dust Bowl happened, it wiped out most of the country's food supply. And through policy changes, through farming practice changes, we were able to recognize that we as a whole need to change our ways to actually thrive. So using Eastern Washington as an example, those farmers still need practices and quality products to use. And we on the West can be supporting that through our purchasing habits, through supporting our government suggesting policies for good farming practices. Monsanto is a company that has a lot of influence in Eastern Washington right now, based on seed patents, and we as consumers choose what to use, but it's really hard when there's kind of this back screen to how the economy runs. I don't necessarily feel like we have a choice of where Eastern Washingtonians buy their seed from, but our government can actually create policies that help farmers get local seed and changing their farming practices by offering discounts and what do we call it? Providing subsidies. And that's something we can vote for. Bioregionalism would suggest that we create co-ops that can provide seeds and better farming infrastructure. And clean water. Again, we all need clean water. So I would hope that we would agree with people in Eastern Washington that we all want clean water, and we want a government that makes sure we have clean water. Does that kind of drag on and answer the question a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's a real cohesiveness for the bioregion. I just wonder if it's going to be insulting to somebody on Vancouver Island or whatever to say that they live in the Cascadia region.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that's a regional identity that we can help spread.
Yeah.
And maybe we ought to rename the mountain range.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, like the Salish Sea, but yeah, it should be the same thing. Yeah.
I have a comment to add to that about the desert area. I was just thinking how it really is still totally surrounded by water and mountains.
Yeah,
and
mountains
you don't
all
really,
over.
you know, if you're in a little desert area in Eastern Washington, you don't really have to drive far to find water or to get into the mountains. You're still there. You know?
Yeah.
You could even probably walk within a day's time to a mountain or a water source.
Yeah.
Easy.
And that is our regional identity. Even in other eco-regions, we have the same identifying features. And that is part of the definition of a bioregion, is we have cultural similarities as well as geographical similarities. Any other questions or thoughts, comments? All right, well, thank you everybody for participating in that. And again, we have these maps for sale for $2. And I encourage everybody to look over our shop in the back. We have some more Cascadia swag, including flags and hats and buttons or pins, badges, stickers.
And free information on upcoming actions.
Free information on upcoming actions, yes. Thank you, Erin. And as I mentioned earlier, this map up here I will pull down after Brandon's talk, and I'm encouraging everybody to help in coloring in the main watersheds of the region. I've been asking around through the people making up the bioregional movement. We don't have a map yet of the watersheds, so this can be a first of its kind, I think. Yeah, that is bioregionalism.